Hello everyone and welcome again to this SQL course. So we are here in another section of our SQL course. Here in this one we are going to check more advanced stuff on select statements, and as we've learned a lot of things here in SQL, we are now going to compound that knowledge in learning a bit more about select statements, and particularly two things. We are going to learn about subqueries, and we are going to learn how we can use select statements to insert data in a new table. So let's jump right into it. We are here in section 6. If you go here to the course materials, it should be this 6 more on select statements. This is the section that we are going to start right now. Okay, so subqueries are a really powerful concept here in SQL, and we are going to start by learning them. You can pick up this one subquery script and also connect to your local server. Okay, so let me start with the select Sequila film. Of course, this is one of the staples here in this course that we've been learning. Remember that this is a table that contains different movies and also the description of those movies, the release year, the language, and so on. And now, for example, I want, using a join, to pick up what's the language description for a specific movie. So if I go here, select, for example, I want a.title, the language ID, and the length. Now, I want something else. I want something extra. I'm actually going to put right next to language ID. I want to pick up, and there's a table here called sequila.language. I think it's language. Let's see. There you go. That has a decode between the language ID and the name of the language. So English, Italian, Japanese, and so on. I want to bring this column here. We've learned how to do this, of course, with a join. That's what we are going to do here. So b.name. And this will go in this way. From, of course, the table A will be sequila.film as A. Then we do an inner join with sequila.language as B. And now we need the column that's going to connect this, which will be, of course, language ID is equal to B language ID. Okay, cool. So we'll have this join, we'll run it, and now, of course, we'll have then these 4 columns, and we have a new language name right here, English, for language ID 1. So now one of the most cool things about SQL is that we can now query this result again. When we have a result here, this is commonly called the set result. When we have this set right here, we can now perform a query on top of this set. So imagine that this would be a table that is physically created in your database. As we are doing queries, we can now compound on this query, on this result, and do a query on top of this. For example, I'm going to pick up this query again. I'm going to call here subquery. And it's called a subquery because it's a query nested inside another query. And now I can do, for example, one of the simple ways to do subqueries is to close this, call this an alias. So all this query is an alias, and I can do on top of this select all or myQuery.all from the following statement. So the following SQL query that is being treated as this alias. So we are selecting from a specific query itself. If I run this one, of course the result is the same because I'm just doing a select all. Now, as you might imagine, this is extremely interesting because we can now do all the operations that we've learned so far in select with subqueries that we have also created ourselves in the same script. For example, if I want to do, imagine a group by language to check the average length of the movies by the language name, not by the language ID, I can do the following. So I'll pick up this my query, which will be the inner part of my query, close this one, and now what I can do is, remember, select name, or I'm going to state my query.name, and then avg from my query.length. I know probably this seems a long time ago, but we are going to do a group by statement as avg length from all the query that is right here. There's still a thing missing. Remember that to have these aggregator functions, we need the group by. So I'm going to do group by myQuery.name. Now let's go a bit slow here. What we are doing is treating this query, this inner query that we see right here, with an alias, and then we are doing several things with this alias. We are doing myQuery.name, an average of myQuery.length as the average length, and we are selecting everything from this subquery. So we are performing, it's as if, imagine that this table would be created with the name myQuery. It would be, if we would do, for example, sakila.myquery, but we don't have this table created anywhere in our database. We are creating it in loco, so we are creating it right here with a query as well. One of the things that will help you to structure this is to write your query imagining what would be here, for example, my custom query as my query, and then just do it backwards. Go inside this my custom query and start to do here inside some select statement. And let me return. That can also be a way for you to think through these subqueries. You can do it starting on the subquery itself, applying the logic to the subquery and then applying something on top of that logic, or you can start to think about what you want to do and then applying a subquery on that statement, imagining that that table would be created. Now, if I run this, something super cool happens. I have the name and the average length for English movies. In this case, in this table or in the Sakila database, we only have English movies. So that's why we only have here this name. Now, this is really cool because this gives us a really good flexibility on working with SQL. We now can access subqueries, or we can use subqueries inside specific queries to retrieve results. So everything that we have learned so far, basically we can use all the select statements, group bys and all that on top of those results that we have already learned, or everything that we've already learned so far. So this was the intro to subqueries. I hope this was pretty explicit to you, how we are using a query inside a query. This is also commonly called nested queries. It's also another name for this subquery concept here in SQL. In the next lecture, we are going to approach another example using subqueries, because we are not going to see just one example. Of course, because being exposed multiple times to this concept will help you to understand what we are doing with this SQL concept. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lecture.